So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Caesar's Palace for 12 rounds of boxing. In the red corner, from Los Angeles, California, wearing the red trunks with the gold trim, weighing in at 125 pounds, the lightweight champion of the world, Danny Little Red Lopez. Well, Bill, our winners get a home theater receiver. That's right. Experience the full potential of high-definition video with this 72-channel digital home theater receiver from Yamaha. But wait, that's not all. They also get a 5.1-channel surround sound system from Mirage. With 5 palm-sized speakers and a compact subwoofer cube, the MX 5.1 brings you huge immersive sound with Mirage's omnipolar technology. All from the Spiegel catalog, Chicago, Illinois, 60609. And they're taking closer order as down the stretch they come. Mr. Hot Stuff has 3 lengths to make up with chocolate candy last. On the rail, take the points behind that gallant son with chocolate candy gaining on the outside. In the lead is Pioneer of the Nile being tackled by chocolate candy. They're neck and neck as they come to the wire. And Pioneer of the Nile holds off chocolate candy and wins the Santa Anita Derby. And now, on your feet, time to greet holder of 14 NBA titles, your home team, your Los Angeles Lakers. Number 3 at 6'8", 5th year out of UCLA, playing forward, Trevor Ariza. Starting at center, number 17 at 7 feet, 4th year out of St. Andrews High School, Andrew Bynum. And at guard, number 24, 6'6", 13th season out of Loyal Marion High School, Kobe Bryant.
I like rice. Rice is great when you're hungry and you want 2,000 of something.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Apollo Wednesday, April the 30th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, and Apollo. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, the headlines. The Wisconsin Supreme Court suspended a judge accused of helping a man evade immigration authorities. Last week, Treasury went live with its first automated payment verification system. In total, $334 million in improper payment requests were identified and rejected. Our nation is safer, common sense has been restored, and America is being put first. Zero mercy. President Trump just called out ABC to their faces for covering up Biden's decline. Harvard has caved in its fight with President Trump and is vowing to make changes that closely paralleled a list of demands by the Trump administration's own anti-Semitism task force. Canada surpasses California as state with most liberal governor. And those were the headlines for today, April the 30th. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Political Corner starring Stephen A. Smith.
When it comes to immigration enforcement, there is no doubt that Donald Trump has been successful. We can slice it any way we want to, but Joe Biden having an open border policy caused a lot of problems in this nation, particularly the psyche of American citizens. You cannot have folks crossing the border illegally in an undocumented fashion, thinking that that is going to bode well for American citizens. Whether it's courtesy of $53 million in prepaid credit cards that were doled out by the Adams administration, the mayor of New York, whether it's Gavin Newsom in the state of California, indicating that there's some debt issues with Medicare because of the money that you spent on illegal immigration, whether it's crimes in the streets, whether it's the perception that the streets are unsafe in the streets of America simply because of an immigration problem. You cannot have that. And the fact that Trump rolled up in there and cleaned this stuff up, prioritizing border control, definitely is going to be perceived as a plus, whether Democrats and others like it or not.
And that was Stephen A. Smith in the Political Corner. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Patriotic Short.
Why do modern warships barely have any armor? This is one of the biggest warships in the U.S. Navy, but it has almost no real armor. And this is China's Type 055 destroyer, one of the most advanced warships in the world. Yet it has no heavy armor either. The USS Iowa was one of the last heavily armored battleships. It could take multiple hits and keep fighting. But guns are not the threat anymore. Missiles are. They do not just hit a ship. They explode on impact, causing massive damage. And torpedoes are even worse. They detonate under the hull, snapping ships in two. So instead of thick steel, modern warships rely on stealth, missile defenses, and electronic warfare.
And that was the Patriotic Short. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of motivation.
One of the greatest tragedies in life is to live and not know why you're living. I'm just wondering if there's anybody here that wants their future, that wants to fulfill their destiny, that wants to manifest, that wants to walk in discipline and determination. I'm just wondering, is there anybody here that's willing to disappear? Are you willing to forsake all distractions? Can you hide yourself in the library? Can you hide yourself in the gym? Can you hide yourself in the boardroom and plan and Jobs once said, "We do not say anything about future products. We work on them in secret, and then we release them to the world." We only have so much real estate in our minds and our hearts. We only have so much bandwidth in our mental capacity. And the more distractions, the more delusions, the more negativity that we allow to take up real estate in our hearts and in our minds, the less energy we have to fulfill the call, to fulfill destiny, to manifest the idea. Everything that you think about, that you meditate on, everything that has to your attention has to be worth your time. So now it's time to navigate and do an appraisal of everything that's in our life, everything and everybody in our life. Time to do an appraisal and ask them this question: are you worth my time? If you're not, it's time to unplug. Time to unplug. Time to unplug. I'm just wondering if there's anybody that can hear my voice right now that has come to the end of themselves and they are willing to eliminate distractions. They are willing to delete social media apps if they have to. They are willing to walk away from everything that is distracted, everything that has diluted your devotion and your determination, every disease and dysfunction and disorder that has pulled you from destiny after you have heard it, after you have received it, after you have written it down, after you have spoken it once. Do what is required to manifest it into reality. If you can see it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. Stop telling everybody what you're going to do. Stop telling everybody what your next move is, and just disappear and do the work that is required. Don't be bitter. Don't be frustrated. Listen, just remain faithful behind the scenes. Promotion is coming. Stages and opportunities are being prepared right now as you sacrifice in secret, as you put the work in the dark room, as you do what is required to hold in your hand what you see in your head.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of meditation.
urge to dive deep within my own mind and to trust the intuition of the lives I've lived before this. Our essential form of gnosis, it's a simple form of freedom. It's as smooth as inhalation. Oh, the exhale is releasing all the tension I've been feeling on the surface and beneath me. I'm connecting to my spirit, and I'm here now right before you. I am present in this moment, and my life's work is to honor the great beauty all around you. Oh, 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 oh. Free from all old stories I've been told, I walk through the valley of my own shadow.
And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Daily Stoic.
The opulent Stoic. The founder of the universe, who assigned to us the laws of life, provided that we should live well, but not in luxury. Everything needed for our well-being is right before us, whereas what luxury requires is gathered by many miseries and anxieties. Let us use this gift of nature and count it among the greatest things. Seneca, Moral Letters, 119.15b. Even in his own time, Seneca was criticized for preaching Stoic virtues while accumulating one of the largest fortunes in Rome. Seneca was so rich that some historians speculate that major loans he made to the inhabitants of what is now Britain caused what became a horrifically brutal uprising there. His critics' derisive nickname for him was the opulent Stoic. Seneca's response to this criticism is pretty simple. He might have wealth, but he didn't need it. He wasn't dependent on it or addicted to it. Nor, despite his large bank account, was he considered to be anything close to Rome's most lavish spenders and pleasure hunters. Whether his rationalization was true or not, or whether he was a tad hypocritical, his is a decent prescription for navigating today's materialistic and wealth-driven society. This is the pragmatic instead of the moralistic approach to wealth. We can still live well without becoming slaves to luxury, and we don't need to make decisions that force us to continue to work and work and work and drift further from study and contemplation in order to get more money to pay for the things we don't need. There is no rule that says financial success must mean that you live beyond your means.
And that was the Daily Stoic. And now, Father Ripperger.
So what's the definition of sanctifying grace? The definition is an entitative habit residing in the essence of the soul by which we participate in divine nature. Okay, I want to unpack that just a little bit. Entitative habit means that it's a real thing. It's something that we have. Sanctifying grace qualitatively changes our soul. Unlike Martin Luther, who just said it was God's perception that changed, which is rooted in falsity. Right? That's one of the ways we know it's almost diabolic in its nature, that we're wretched for all eternity. But it's just how God looks at us. How is that not any different from the way the demon's going to feel, right? In some degree. But it qualitatively changes us. What's this quality? Well, God is goodness itself, and we know that what pleases us is what is something that is actually good.
And that was Father Chad. Back in a minute. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "The United States is broke. Justice does exist in the world, whether people choose to practice it or not. The men of ability are being avenged. The avenger is reality. Its weapon is slow, silent, invisible, and men perceive it and only by its consequences, by the gutted ruins and the moans of agony it leaves in its wake. The name of the weapon is inflation." Unquote. And that was Ayn Rand from the chapter Egalitarianism and Inflation from the book Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you, Varney.
Up, Stu, take it away.
Good morning, Maria. Good morning, everyone. The president came out swinging and dancing to celebrate 100 days in office. He returned to the big rally format to encourage his base and cement his accomplishments. He was funny and harsh, at one point telling deep state bureaucrats to get the hell out of here. His words. There is positive tariff news this morning. Howard Lutnick says a deal has been done with an unnamed trading partner. He says he's only waiting for the country's prime minister and parliament to sign off on it. Who has a prime minister and a parliament? India. A big day for the president at the White House. He holds a cabinet meeting at 11 Eastern. It is possible he will make some comments on camera. At 4 p.m. Eastern, he brings top CEOs to show how much money is being invested in America to bring back jobs. It's about $5 trillion. We're looking at a down market this morning. First quarter GDP showed a slight shrinkage for the economy, but core inflation ticks up, not what the market wants to hear. The Dow, after a 300-point gain Tuesday, is down about 350 points this Wednesday morning. S&P down 77. A big drop for the NASDAQ. That is down almost 2% in the pre-market trading. You better look at Starbucks, way down on news of its fifth straight quarterly decline in same-store sales. It is down 9.8%. Meta, Microsoft, they report this afternoon. Their results will have market impact tomorrow morning. Right now, both stocks are a little lower. Meta is down over 2.5%. As for Bitcoin, last time I checked, it was at 95 grand. It slipped to 94.5. The yield on the 10-year Treasury, that's well below 4.25%. You're looking at 4.20. And the 2-year, well below 3.7%, 3.66 right there. On the show today, China feeling the pain of its tariff war. Exports down, manufacturing down. The Economist magazine's reporters in China show order cancellations for fridges, washing machines, plastic Christmas trees, baseball caps, a whole range of goods. Goldman Sachs says 16 million jobs in China's export sector are in danger. Pain in California. 50,000 unionized city workers on strike in Los Angeles. Ambulance drivers, librarians, custodians, even workers clearing the wildfire debris. They've walked out. The city and the state are in dire financial straits. Tonight, Kamala Harris delivers her first major speech since losing the election. She will deliver it in, where else? San Francisco. And President Trump, he wants $1 trillion golden dome to defend against missile attack. That reminds me of Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, otherwise known as Star Wars, ridiculed at first, but widely accepted today. And Senator Loomis, she is going to join us. She has a bipartisan bill to get rid of the penny. when it costs 4 cents to make a 1 cent coin, you know it's time to give it up. Wednesday, April 30th, 2025.
And that was Stuart Varney, and he said, quote, the markets don't want to hear that, unquote. And the markets are not sentient life forms. They don't have ears. What he should have said is, Jamie Dimon doesn't want to hear that, and so Jamie Dimon is dumping stock. That's what he's doing. The markets are in the red because Jamie Dimon is dumping stock. Things don't just happen. They're made to happen. There you have it. Good old Stu Varney gaslighting his way to oblivion. Non-profit news now. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining, you're losing, mean? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, if you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
Of this. How long before there's a trade deal with China? Well, a lot depends on how much pain is inflicted. Here's the state of play. There's more pain in China than in America. China's National Bureau of Statistics reports factories there are experiencing a serious slowdown. Manufacturing is contracting. Quite simply, export orders are being cancelled. America's tariffs are hurting. The Economist magazine sent its reporters around the country. They found a maker of fridges and washing machines, 3,000 orders cancelled. A maker of plastic Christmas trees who sells mostly in America, orders have dried up. A maker of baseball caps, including MAGA hats, half his orders cancelled. The World Trade Organization predicts a 77% decline in Chinese products sold in America this year. Ooh. Goldman Sachs says 16 million jobs in China's export sector are in danger. Now, Xi Jinping's power rests on prosperity. Granted, he doesn't have to worry about voters. There's no free vote in China. But his communist colleagues will not be happy if Xi leads them into poverty. Now, on the American side, no serious pain at this point. Yeah, lots of worry, lots of uncertainty. For example, a 35% drop in ships unloading goods from China expected next week at the port of Los Angeles. That suggests empty shelves and shortages to come. However, importers front-loaded, and all the extra supply is now stored here in bonded warehouses waiting for release. Now, that limits the pain, and the president is clearly prepared to tweak his policy further to keep the damage in check. So if we're balancing pain, it seems the scales are tipped in America's favor. And if there is indeed a signed and sealed deal with India or South Korea or Japan, the pressure on Beijing rises some more. Isolation in a trade war is no fun. Secondara Varney just getting started.
And that was My Take. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Apollo, chapter 14, section 6, and the beginning of chapter 15.
6. And so the word spread, and NASA changed forever. It was not only 3 astronauts who died on that evening in January 1967. Some of the space program's lightheartedness and exuberance died too. Things had been changing all along, of course, as Apollo swelled to thousands, then tens of thousands of workers. Things had to change. Already it had been a long time since Abe Silverstein could name Apollo as he would name his baby, a long time since Max Faget had thrown paper plates from a balcony at Langley, or Jack Kinsler had lashed a spacecraft onto the back of a flatbed truck. But the fire was a demarcation of the loss of innocence. Never again would individuals be allowed to take so much responsibility onto themselves, to place so much faith in their own experience and judgment. By the time of the fire, there were already many books of rules to go by, and thenceforth, the people who had written the rules would themselves have to be governed by them. Before the fire, there had been a sense in which Marshall was still Werner von Braun's little band of Germans grown larger, the Cape still Kurt Diebus's launch team grown larger, Houston still Bob Gilruth's Space Task Group grown larger. No more. For many of the Apollo people, the night of the fire was also when they stopped believing in their invulnerability. With a young guy, you don't realize sometimes you can't do something, so you go ahead and do it, said one Cape engineer. As you get older, you get more cautious, and you have a fear of how you would look if you failed. The night of the fire, the young men of the space program suddenly became much older. After that night, there would always be a heightened sense not just that things could go wrong, they had always known that, but that things might actually go wrong, something that had been hard for the young ones to recognize. But these were changes to be discovered in retrospect. That night, the people of Apollo grieved. It made no difference how many thousands of people were in the program. It made no difference that only a few of them had known the astronauts personally. That night, the astronauts were mourned as family. At the Cape, it was the numbed grief of people who have to carry on. Hardly anyone on the vast Merritt Island reservation got home before the early hours of Saturday morning, and many didn't get home for days. The reaction was most intense among the North American people. It was their spacecraft, and they were the people who had certified that it was ready to fly. Marty Schofiletti was by now working on the reaction and control system for the command module. He and a half dozen of the other North American engineers, people who had been working together for years, close friends, gathered in one of the North American offices. People started saying, "It had to be your system because I know my system was clean," Schofiletti recalled. Those guys knew each other, and they would have staked their lives that the other guy would do the right thing in an emergency. And here they were, almost coming to a fistfight that night over whose system was to blame. And nobody knew whose system was to blame. Jesus, it was only an hour after the thing happened. At Houston, far from the scene, with nothing for most of them to do, the grief was more uncomplicated. When Jerry Bostic drove into the parking lot outside the control center, he knew only that something pretty bad had happened. The first thing he saw was his friend Dutch von Ehrenfried crying uncontrollably in the parking lot, saying over and over, "It's horrible, it's horrible." Bostic was mystified. He wondered whether Dutch had experienced some strange kind of breakdown. John Aaron, who would be so dispassionately in control during moments of crisis in Apollo 12 and 13, was so shaken that Rod Lowe went to the control center to drive him home. Rod and Tina Lowe would have no celebratory poker party that night. Some of the other controllers who had been on shift in the control center went to the Singing Wheel, a nearby roadhouse that was a favorite hangout. They usually went there to wind down after simulations or to celebrate splashdowns. But they discovered that night that the Singing Wheel was also a good place for a wake. They sat at the bar, drinking and talking quietly until the small hours of the morning. Chapter 15. The Crucible. The first of the small planes touched down at the KSC airstrip shortly before midnight after the 2-hour flight from Washington. Gilruth, Miller, Diebus, Phillips, and Atwood were aboard. The plane from Houston carrying Faget, Shea, and a half dozen of the key technical people in NASPO arrived an hour later. They gathered first in the ACE control room, listening on headsets as the ACE controllers talked to the men on the tower who were removing the astronauts' bodies. For some of them, it was a time of belated revelation. Lee Atwood, president of North American, found himself staggered when he found out what the test conditions were. Locking those men in a spacecraft pumping 16 pounds of oxygen on them and telling them to operate complicated electrical equipment. It all seemed so obviously wrong to him now. And yet they had been doing countdown tests in pure oxygen environments since Mercury. They had sealed astronauts into spacecraft for pure oxygen ground tests throughout Gemini. The designers of the Apollo spacecraft had weighed the pros and cons of changing to a two-gas system. There seemed to be too many cons, and finally they decided to leave it as it was. As in many aspects of Apollo, all of the alternatives had dangers associated with them. Pure oxygen was essential in orbit, and accordingly was retained in orbit even after the fire, because cabin pressure in orbit was only about 1/3 the pressure at sea level. Normal air at that pressure doesn't have enough oxygen to sustain life. For sea-level operations, the original Mercury capsule had pure oxygen in the suit loop and normal sea-level atmosphere in the cabin. But a test pilot for McDonnell, and brother of Warren North, who was in charge of astronaut training at Houston, almost died during a test involving the Mercury capsule precisely because, for a complicated chain of technical reasons, the cabin was not flooded with pure oxygen. This led to the initial decision to keep the cabin at pure oxygen on the ground as well as in space. That history, plus weight and reliability disadvantages of a two-gas system, affected subsequent design decisions during Gemini and Apollo. A similar balancing of dangers had to attend the decision after the fire to convert the hatch into an outward opening one. The new design was safer than an inward opening hatch while the astronauts were on the ground. It was less safe when the astronauts were in space, and enough heavier that it required a redesign of the parachute system, which in turn involved a host of competing considerations to be weighed and balanced. Shea decided later that night to move into the astronauts' quarters on the 3rd floor of the Operations and Checkout (O&C) building. He later explained it as part of a shift into the mode he had used to resolve prior technical crises. Move on to the site, work all 3 shifts, understand what has gone wrong, fix it. But Shea was doing something more than that, for the astronauts' quarters were exceedingly private, a sacristy usually inviolate in Shea's own curious choice of words. There were other places just as close to the investigation where he could have stayed, but Shea had to choose the very rooms where the dead astronauts had slept. It would not be the last time that Joe Shea made sure that he could not turn away even for a moment. Shea then went down to a meeting with Gilruth and Miller and Lowe. First, they decided who was going to be on the investigative panel. They moved quickly through most of the names, but got into an argument when it came to choosing an astronaut for the panel. Gilruth wanted Wally Schirra, Grissom's backup for Apollo 1. Shea was opposed. Schirra was a good astronaut, Shea said, but he was not as immersed in the details of the spacecraft's design as were Jim McDivitt and Frank Borman, the prime candidates for the first lunar landing. The way Deke Slayton's rotation system was set up, it looked as if McDivitt might now be tied up preparing for the first Apollo flight. That left Borman. The rest were persuaded, and Borman was put on the panel. Shea finally got to sleep at 4 a.m.
And that was the end of Chapter 14 and the beginning of Chapter 15 of Apollo. This is a book that I was hoping was going to stir more patriotic feelings in me, but it really doesn't. It's rather ponderous and heavy, but I continue to play it because the guy that reads this has a fabulous voice. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.